Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Zach Celadonia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and yes, setting out a little bit of a sigh of relief because, number one, we got Flash Zach Celadonia right back on the horn here after some technical issues. What's going on, my friend?
Yeah. Technical issues is putting it lightly. My phone wasn't working. My audio wasn't working. I got allergies acting up. I'm going through it, man. I can't see at night when I drive very well. I'm getting very, very close to 30 here. You can tell I'm getting older.
Oh, my goodness. I'm north of 40 now. I'm catching up to Brian, who's like, 80 or 90 or something. Brian was ready to jump on here. I said, no, we've actually been trying to do this show for like 3 days now. And it's probably better that we didn't, because now they finally got to speak. Some of the beat writers, that is, on the Steelers beat, got to speak to Omar Khan. So it goes right into what are the top offseason priorities for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, it's just to jump right into this, because I'm hoping, Flash, that we could repeat and come back and boomerang back around maybe Monday. We got some report cards and things to do and stuff, but try to give the folks the content, you know what I mean? Get on a little more consistently here as things ramp up. Free agency draft around the corner. And so there's like speculation out to what. And I know we were talking offline. We were actually talking face to face for what little I could hear you with the audio issues yesterday. Not good enough to record. And we're just sick of hearing the quarterback stuff. So let's say it though. Let's put it this way. I don't have quarterback as a top priority as much as everyone else does, because I have a decent feeling about how they want to sort through the weeds with that. But how do you feel about the top priorities? What positions do you think are top priorities? And do you have quarterback as a, what you say, top priority for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason?
Well, that's an interesting question for sure, because I feel like a part of me does still believe in Kenny Pickett and wants to believe in Kenny Pickett. And rightfully so. I feel like when you listen to what Omar Khan has to say about the quarterback room and Kenny Pickett in particular, you gain a sense of security if you think Kenny Pickett is the guy, that they are still evaluating that and still have him as a likely option to be the starter in 2024. As far as calling it a need, I don't know, that's a specific term, but I do know one thing. I do know that they only have one guy under contract right now on the roster, and that is Kenny Pickett. So they're going to add to the room in some way or fashion, whether it's Mason Rudolph coming back, whether it's a journeyman, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's Justin Fields. There's a reason why this is being discussed across all platforms. Regardless of how you feel about Kenny Pickett, the theory that they're going to bring in competition for him or somebody to start over him or whatever, that's a very real thing that is taking place in the Steelers organization right now. I'll get into your part two of your question in a second here, but there was a quote from Omar Khan today that I had to write down because it was pretty telling in my opinion, and it goes like this. So one of the reporters, it might have been Mike Prosciutto, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it was some typical popular Pittsburgh beat writer, because he had the first question. Omar Khan clearly knew who he was, like he smiled at him and stuff. So his question was, he phrased it like, I'm going to warm you up for the Hell's Row that you're about to be a part of here at the Combine. And he said, are you trading for Justin Fields? Flat out asked him, are you trading for Justin Fields? And Omar Khan went on to say, I'm not going to go into details about the conversations that we've had, but like I've mentioned earlier, I have an obligation to work. I have an obligation to look at every avenue that's out there to try and make us a better football team. He had a chance right there to say, no, Kenny Pickett's argument. No, I like what Kenny offers. I have a theory that we're going to bring Mason Rudolph, etc. But he didn't dismiss the question. He answered it in a very political fashion, being like, I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, I'm open to it. Nothing certain yet, but we're looking at it. And a reporter to the left of him joked like, oh, well, what about Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins? Omar Khan doubled down and was like, I'm going to say the same answer. We're going to hold on those.
You know what?
My point is basically, sorry, but my point is, he had a chance there to be like, no, we're comfortable with Kenny Pickett, which in other parts of this interview, he did go on to mention that he is confident in what Kenny Pickett can become, and they still believe in Kenny Pickett. But if he believed in him that much and it was that certain that Kenny Pickett was going to be the starter in 2024, he could have very easily just been like, no, we're not looking at Justin Fields at this point. He left the door open almost like a cat and mouse kind of deal with the Bears to be like, we're not closed off to the idea, but Omar Khan's good at what he does. I know he's only had 1 year in so far, but he's not an idiot. He's not going to make it known that he wants Justin Fields to everybody. I strongly believe they're in conversations with the Bears, but they don't want to give up anything more than a third. If they give up a second, it'd be pretty surprising. But I think the conversations are there, and thus, I guess to answer your question, long story short, quarterback could be viewed as a need because they only have one guy under contract, and it's Kenny Pickett. As far as the other spots, the playing board right now, it's wide open. Free agency is yet to begin, so that's going to affect everything with the draft, as it always does. But this year in particular, just based off of what we know and looking at the depth chart and listening to Omar Khan's first round of interviews and hearing what the prospects at the combine have to say about who they've met with at the combine, it sure seems like the Steelers are turning over every stone on defense in particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am a real big fan of the idea that they can get their next franchise right tackle and center with their first two picks, 1 and 2. But the closer we get to the action here, the more it seems likely that defense is on their mind for one of their, if not multiple of their top picks. And there's good defensive linemen, there's good cornerbacks, there's good safeties, there's a handful of defensive linemen I like, and they're taking time to meet with all of these guys. So, like I said, free agency can change a lot of things, but they seem to be really, really leaning towards investigating the defensive prospects of this draft class, which I have no problem with. Defense wins championships. So if they want to load up on defense, there's holes. There's no surefire corner opposite of Joey Porter. There's no surefire defensive lineman outside of Cam Hayward and Keanu Benton and Larry Ogunjobi. The linebacker room could use a fresh face. I know Cole Holcomb's battling back from an injury. We still have Landon Roberts, but Quan Alexander isn't re-signed yet. So really what I'm getting at here is the Steelers have like 4 or 5 different ways they can go with their first two picks. So they're in a funny area here where they have a lot of needs, quote unquote, but they're not a terrible team, but they could go a lot of different directions in their first two picks.
Yeah, most certainly, dude. There's a couple things there. I'm pretty sure the beat writer that asked about and what about Russell Wilson and what about everybody else, I'm pretty sure that was Jim Wexell. So
probably Wexell's a dog, man. He does a good job. I'm a big fan of Jim.
Yeah, as am I. So yeah, Omar's gonna play the game. He knows how to do it. Certainly the Bears are probably intimidated because of what happened with the Chase Claypool trade, giving up a second. They would like some compensation back. That worries me. I'll just say right now, that worries me that we're all human at the end of the day. So there's definitely a part of Ryan Poles, I'm sure, the Bears GM and higher ups of that building. I'm sure there's a part of them that's like, listen, guys, we can't get taken for a ride again with the Steelers. We can't afford that with the fan base, our fans, opposing fans, because not a day goes by that they're not reminded that they took Chase Claypool for Joey Porter Jr., essentially, who is the Steelers' number 1 cornerback. Looks like he's going to be a number 1 corner in the NFL. So they won that trade, and the Bears have been clowned, rightfully so, as a result of that trade. So that's definitely there. It worries me as somebody who's open to the Justin Fields idea that they may be hesitant to do a deal with the Steelers because we're all human. So there's a chance that they're like, you know what, these guys, they know what they're doing. They're not giving us all of the information that they know. We're going to refrain from doing business with them because there is another suitor for Justin Fields outside of the Steelers. It sure seems like the Falcons and the Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons and the Steelers, they are the two teams that everybody is pointing to as the Justin Fields destination. However, there's a lot of stories out there, and you got people like Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks,
like draft experts that know their stuff, they have been told and they have a feeling that the Falcons are actually going to be really aggressive with this draft class, trying to move up to potentially draft a new quarterback. And when all of those guys are on the same page, there's a little fire to that smoke. So I'm not saying they're out of the Justin Fields running at all, but the Falcons are exploring multiple revenues with quarterback. Fields, I'm sure, is a part of their conversations, but a part of me wants to believe or does believe that the Steelers and the Falcons are pretty much neck and neck as far as like, yeah, we're interested in Justin Fields, but we're not going to give away the farm to get him. They both, I feel like, are interested, but it's going to come down. It's like a game of chicken with these two teams. Like, who's going to give up the most? Omar Khan has showed in his short time that he's good enough to not fall for that kind of shit. But I think the Steelers, the Falcons, and wild card, the Raiders are in play for Justin Fields.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was looking at the teams that. Yeah, that's the easy thing though. It's like anybody. I mean, just even sitting in our chairs right now, you just look at it and it's easy to talk about because you're like, is the quarterback position settled for? Fill in the blanks for these teams. And it's like, you look at the top of the draft. Is it settled for the Bears? Not necessarily, not with Fields. But he was a number 1 pick. So can they move on, put him wherever? Well, the Steelers went and grabbed Dwayne Haskins, but they didn't do anything like to actually get Dwayne Haskins. Nobody wanted him by that point. He, if you remember, it was the strip club thing. He got in trouble with the team with COVID and everything like that. You look at the Washington Commanders are sitting at number 2 because nobody's really talking that the Bears have pick 9 too. So can they play chicken with this and then come back around if they like somebody else? Like a Marvin Harrison, would they make Marvin Harrison Jr. the number 1 pick or do something crazy like that? You never know. But we've seen that backfire with teams too. Like Buffalo did that years ago with Sammy Watkins, remember? Instead of getting the quarterback for Sammy, they just went and got Sammy. So
there are fans in I follow a lot of other teams' fan bases the best I can to try to get a beat on their situation. And there are a good bit of Chicago Bears fans that want them to just stick with Fields, trade back, and get weapons for him because Justin Fields, I don't feel like he's good enough and he showed enough potential that the Bears wouldn't be looking to move on from him if they didn't have the first overall pick. Caleb Williams is rightfully so viewed as a generational quarterback talent. Whether or not you think he's going to be good or not, I'll leave that argument to a different day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he's viewed as next up. Like an Andrew Luck type player. These quarterbacks, every year there's first round quarterbacks, even in Kenny Pickett's draft class. But every year there's first round quarterbacks. Every once in a blue moon, you get a guy who's like, no, this guy is going to be good no matter what. Basically, like with the arm talent, the quick release, the ability to make all the throws from different angles on the field, the current style of quarterback play. Caleb Williams is viewed as that dude. And if the Bears had the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th overall pick, a big part of me, really all of me, believes that they wouldn't be doing this with Fields. I think it's just a matter of like, yeah, Justin Fields has shown enough to believe he can be a starting quarterback and a good quarterback in this league. And the Bears shouldn't, like, the Bears have done way worse at quarterback over their history. Like, Fields is actually like a breath of fresh air for them, I feel like. But they have an opportunity here to get possibly the next Andrew Luck, the next Patrick Mahomes. Fill in the blank here. But that's the type of player Caleb Williams is. So that's why they're in this conundrum, I feel like, the Bears, because if it were Drake May or Penix Jr. or Bo Nix, McCarthy, whatever, I don't feel like the Bears would be entertaining this idea.
Yeah, and it depends on who wants to really give up whatever, not only for Fields, but what might they entertain for that top pick. I've said my piece on Fields. I don't want him.
Yeah, I know. We disagree on this, folks.
I know.
And it's as simple as you've told me to my face that you just think he's reached his ceiling, which I don't think he has. There's no need to like get into like the look at this and look at that. It's really just that. Like I don't think Kenny Pickett's reached his ceiling either.
No.
Like, I hope to God he has.
Okay. So I want this is something you deal with too because of the social media thing. You just think that people try and say you're on Kenny Pickett's nuts or I'm on Kenny Pickett's nuts. It's the fact that I don't feel that Fields has done anything to justify trading. I saw one of the scenarios somebody threw out there was to actually trade Pickett, the Bears. Why would they want him if they're going number 1 overall and taking a different quarterback for an unproven backup behind, let's say, Caleb Williams. And then a 3rd and a 4th round pick. And I'm like, no, I'm not giving up a top 100 and then also a 4th. You said, well, it depends. If that's like a 2025 or whatever 4th round pick, okay, but I'm not giving up player and 2 picks or even like a 1st or a 2nd or something like that just because he's unproven. Nobody's going to give that up for Kenny. And then the same kind of like people say, well, you make excuses for Kenny. Well, make the same. Are you making excuses for Fields too and saying he doesn't have weapons? He doesn't have an offensive line. I mean, look, Kenny bad coaches. Kenny had Matt Canada. Kenny didn't have Deontay Johnson for a long spell of time. So if you got somebody that you're trying to develop or whatever, I guess a lot of it just depends on what's it going to take to bring him in. If it's like nothing and it's a bag of peanuts, let's say they traded I don't know, do the Steelers have a 5th rounder? I got to look and see what all they have. Let's see. The Steelers have, I think they have 2 4th rounders this year because I haven't gotten knee deep in the draft yet. They got picks, compensatory picks haven't come out yet. So no, they don't have a 5th rounder. So like a 6th rounder or something like that, or next year's 5th, but they have 2 4ths. So a 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, 2 4ths, a 6th, and a 7th. So pretty much just a pick a little higher than the 5th round. They give up one of the late, if it's a later 4th. Okay. I'm not going to be bent over it, but like I said, I don't really want the competing, like splitting all the shares. And I don't want this to be a big quarterback only discussion here because there are definitely other priorities that you just came up with. But we did hear Omar Khan say that they have spoken with Mason Rudolph and he clearly put out in the public. He didn't do like, the whole political speak, but that's a guy that's still kind of under their roof that they could negotiate with, that they don't have to wait for tampering periods. And they said, we've told him we want him back. And then we also heard back that Mason also wants to come back as part of this back and forth exchange. So that's part of it. You add Fields to this. I'd feel okay with that, but man, I don't feel okay splitting it 3 ways, splitting the pie 3 ways. What I was going to say is, though, this eerily reminds me of another offseason with you, Flash. But the guy that was out there for the trade talks, even though aging, was a little
Aaron
more
Rodgers.
enticing.
I know. Well, this is different though because they're not going to take a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah.
That's the difference of this. I agree that was a different time in my life, and I still don't regret those takes because Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on the MetLife Stadium, which is infamous for like hurting players' ligaments. So I'm not going to
see that. The Bengals are putting in the same turf at Paycor now.
Of course they are. Of course they're the cheapest franchise in the NFL. So yeah. I don't wish injury upon any player ever. But like if that's what they're willing to risk with their team, more power to you. But the Aaron Rodgers thing is different because the Steelers, that whole offseason, it was always known or believed they were going quarterback first round. The popular names were Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, and Desmond Ridder. They happened to get Kenny Pickett. This year, there was talk at the beginning of the offseason, and it's all seemingly died. There's almost no one that believes the Steelers are going to take at pick 20 who would be there right now, probably either Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr., because I'm pretty certain that obviously Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels will go high, but there's more and more talk that J.J. McCarthy will go high too. Not that I'm a big fan of his anyway, but the Steelers, it wouldn't make sense for them to take the 4th or 5th best quarterback in the draft when Kenny Pickett can probably give you what they're going to give you as rookies anyway. And again, part of me still likes Kenny Pickett. And you brought up the compensation. That's a big part of this too. I've noticed that, whether it's Pittsburgh radio jocks or people with their own blog site or people with a platform that they love to exploit, for lack of a better term, they want their listeners to believe, hey, if you want Justin Fields, that means you want to give up the Steelers' first-round pick or their second-round pick. That's not true, folks. You can think for yourself. I am telling you right now, as somebody who's open to the Justin Fields idea, I don't want to give up a first- or second-round pick for him. I'll go as far to say if they did that, I would be less than enthusiastic. A first-round pick, I'd be pissed. A second-round pick, I would have to sleep on it for a few nights. But as optimistic and as biased as I can be, I don't want them to do that. Like, I want them to try to offer a 3rd and a future 4th or vice versa. And if it has to be more than that, hang up the phone. But people that are, on the radio or have these other sites, they they don't want fans to like think their way through that or think for themselves. And it's so frustrating because I have the same arguments every day with people about like, oh, you want Justin Fields, so you want to give up a second round pick? He's not worth it. No, dude, I don't want to give up that much collateral. I don't think a third and a future fourth is that much at all. Yeah, the Steelers have hit on third round picks. They've also missed on a ton of third round picks. Your first two picks have immense more value than your third and fourth round pick. And Omar Khan is good at what he does. So I don't like the compensation matters a lot, almost more than anything. But if people would just be more open to the idea of this, I feel like it'd be easier to talk about. And another thing with today's interviews and today's interviews and the questions answered from Omar Khan and the Steelers brass, it sounds like they are open to the idea of a quarterback, a new quarterback. They're also open to the idea of Kenny Pickett being the guy. They also want Mason Rudolph back. I'm a unicorn. I'm very unique in this situation right now where I'm open to just about everything. Like every hypothesis or like theorized quarterback the Steelers might get, I can talk my way into how it may work financially, franchise-wise, skill-wise. There's hierarchies for sure, and there's rankings. You know, Russell Wilson isn't my first choice, but I feel like because of the fact that I'm open to the idea of Justin Fields coming in to be the starter, of Kenny Pickett getting one last chance, or Mason Rudolph even being the guy. I'm open to all of these theories, so I see everything Omar Khan is saying, and I can read in between the lines, and I can take what he's saying and compartmentalize it and figure out what's true and what's not. I feel like people that are gunning for Kenny Pickett to be the guy, and I'm not shitting on those people because I am also a Kenny Pickett guy, but the people that just want Kenny or nothing, the people that want Mason or nothing, the people that want Justin Fields or nothing, they are zeroing in on these little sound bites and being like, oh, I told you. See, you see that? He said Kenny Pickett, they like him. Or, see, I told you. They said they want Mason Rudolph back. Or, see, I told you. They said they were looking at Justin Fields. It's like there's a little bit of truth to everything Omar Khan is saying. It's not all truth, but there's a little bit of truth to everything. And I feel like we're so early in this process that it's only reasonable to believe that all of those guys, Kenny, Mason, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, they're all on the table for the Steelers. But if you're like overly biased or you're overly rooting for one of those guys to be the starter, that's all you hear because humans have a tendency to hear what they want to hear and believe what they want to believe. I just mentioned, I'm open to all of these guys to a different extent. So I can hear all of it and be like, okay, well, I think he means this and this and this. It sounds like to me that he's very non-committal to who the quarterback is going to be in 2024. He wants to instill confidence in his young quarterback, who's Kenny Pickett. He wants to make the prioritized free agent quarterback, Mason Rudolph, feel wanted as well. And he wants to leave the door open to be like, yeah, I am looking at Justin Fields. I don't want to talk myself into a corner where I have to give up a second-round pick for him, but they're looking at all those options. And if you want to see it, you can.
Yeah. Did you see his other quote with that, or the comment was Steelers fans were sitting at home on the couch like I was. This was Omar Khan saying it, and watching the Chiefs and 49ers in the Super Bowl, and I want that to be us, and I have an obligation to get us there. It was paraphrasing, but that was part of I'm looking at all the different quarterbacks that are. You're not going to shut the door on anybody if you hear something that's available or whatever. There's also a lot of bullshit out there. Let's face it. A lot of these sources, if they are sources, are going to leak things. Agents are going to leak things. This is like now you're dealing with the next 2 months is just everyone, like you said, playing a game of chicken, but it is 100%, the fact of the matter is that the Steelers have one quarterback under contract right now. So they're got to have somebody kind of come in, and it's going to be somebody with experience. Mason Rudolph has experience. He falls under that category. Justin Fields falls under that category. Hey, I heard Russell Wilson might be available. At least, let's do our diligence, because you'd feel like a real big idiot if the guy does go out there and play for a veteran minimum, as was another speculation or reported thing. And, he just gets outright cut. The Broncos don't even trade him, and now you can bring in the guy for like $1 million that's played and won in a Super Bowl. So these are the things you would be stupid to not look at it. The only people not stupid is somebody like, let's say, Buffalo or Baltimore Ravens or somebody that has a quarterback, an expensive quarterback that's already in place. Now, let me say this caveat because it's going to segue into another priority for the offseason, right? I didn't have this thing set up. Hold on one second. Well, I get this here. Spot Rack has it here. I was going to say, it's the other site other than Over the Cap, but they have projected fifth-year options for the rookie class that's got, that Justin Fields was in, and also Najee Harris. So Justin Fields comes in at just shy of $20 million. If he gets option, he has to have that option exercised this offseason for it to take into effect. So there is a deadline for that. I believe there was a date, and I'll find it somewhere.
Yeah, if it's during the regular season, that's crucial. But I don't feel like.
Yeah, it's before. It's headed up sometime in this offseason.
Okay.
Because this will be his 4th year on his rookie deal, his final year. If you don't exercise, or his new team, that wherever, if Justin Fields gets traded, would have to exercise that option in advance. And the same thing with Najee Harris. I was going to say that's going to be an offseason priority because Najee, real quick, because otherwise I don't think running back is a priority. $6.5 million, which I think he does get option. That seems like a song to me.
Yeah, they have till May 2nd. I saw.
Okay, cool.
And Justin Fields, man, I don't feel like it might be because that looks like a big number, and it is for most positions. But for if the Steelers make that move and they believe Justin Fields can be their guy for a couple of years to come at minimum, $20 million for a starting quarterback, it's not a lot, especially for a starter. It really isn't a lot if he's good. That's actually kind of a discount if he's good. So that's one of my counterpoints to the people like, oh, if you're going to trade for him, you better be prepared to pay the 5th-year option. If they trade for him, that's their intent, I'm sure. So the only thing I will concede is that if they do make this move, and I think I said this when the offseason started, if they do get Justin Fields, there's no competition. If they make that move and they trade the draft capital and they guarantee the 5th-year option, he's the starter. So that's the only part of this Steelers, Omar Khan, Justin Fields puzzle that has a kink in it. And that is Omar Khan has doubled down on the whole, Kenny Pickett, we just want competition for him. We want what's best for the roster. If you bring Justin Fields in, or any of these guys, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, not Mason, but any of those prized free agent veterans, they are the starter. You can't sell to your fan base, oh yeah, we just give up a 3rd and a future 4th, and we're paying Justin Fields $20 million in 2025 to compete with Kenny Pickett. So that is the part of this puzzle that even I am struggling to understand, because it sure seems like they're interested in Justin Fields. It sure seems like they're interested in adding competition for Kenny Pickett, but those are two different things. Justin Fields wouldn't be competition for Kenny Pickett to be the starter. So we're still really in the dark here, but Omar Khan's given us crumbs to try and follow the maze here and figure out what's going on. But I mean, you're seeing reports every day, like you said. I just got sent a tweet not long ago from somebody who has close to 10,000 followers on Twitter, and they said they believe they heard the deal with the Falcons for Fields is already in place. So
yeah, I saw that. I saw that too. And then there's a lot of fake accounts out there that you got to be privy to as well. I was trying to see. I thought they changed this where they can't rescind a 5th-year option. I think this is how the Browns got stuck with Baker Mayfield, and he was supposed to be getting paid like $16 million several years ago when they'd already traded for Deshaun Watson. So that's a whole other. If you bring in Fields and now he wants that extra year or whatever exercise, you're playing with fire. I think any team that does. Because I let them go to the Falcons and let them deal with that mess. I don't want to deal with it. It's just,
I understand, man. I understand.
Stuck.
Not everybody's going to agree on the whole. I totally understand. And it's something so this is what I can't stand about the offseason is you and I are friends and we're co-hosts, obviously. So it's easy for us to talk through this, but people get so I don't know if it's the desire to be right. I don't know if it's the desire to not be wrong, which is the same thing, I guess. But there is so much turmoil and hate fueled in these arguments about quarterback. That's why I feel even I am stressed out, and I'm rather content in my stance that I'm open to multiple options. But if you say anything about any Steelers quarterback, Kenny, Mason, the potential of Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, you're guaranteed to get attacked by somebody. And it's like, people, that the Steelers have to play a quarterback. Somebody has to play a quarterback, and you shouldn't get so mad at somebody theorizing the potential, especially when it's this cut and dry. Like, people can roll the Justin Fields thing off their shoulder as much as they want. There's a reason why it's being talked about on every sports network and TV show and blog site and radio show. It's because that has legs to it. And again, you're talking to a guy who believes in Kenny Pickett still, and I wouldn't be upset if he's the guy in 2024, because I think you can justifiably believe, give him this year, and then if it doesn't work out, then it's curtains. And but that's the beauty, I guess, in the ugly side of being a sports fan. It's like it becomes personal awfully fast, and quarterback is such an important spot that you're seeing it tenfold in the Steeler fan base right now.
Yeah, and also with that, with Spot Track in the 5th-year salary. So when they redid this CBA in 2020, it's no longer just guaranteed if it's an injury or something that they could pull back. It's also based on performance. If they've made a Pro Bowl, which is a joke actually, but it's in the list of like options. If they've done this, that, how much playing time they've had, et cetera, and that ends up being almost, depending on where it's at, like as much as a franchise tag. It's actually kind of crazy. So, but anyways, that's a good point, because regardless of who the quarterback is, there's other priorities this team has to meet. And whether or not we want to defend a take and say, well, Justin Fields has played poorly because his offensive line sucked. Well, Kenny Pickett has too. So that's the next thing. And that's actually something that Omar Khan brought up. And it was funny because you actually tweeted this coincides with segueing from quarterbacks. Wasn't it that something about, well, Mason won't be here or something like that. And then you had to I saw your tweet and it was like, Mason, what happens is I get the alerts on my phone, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you talking about? And
you got my notifications turned on, bro.
Well, you're part of my bells and whistles. I keep tabs on all of our folks here with the underground part, right? But it was like you were talking about Mason Cole, and it was Mason Cole that was being talked about, and not Mason Rudolph necessarily. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was like, Omar, you might want to be a little more specific given the gravity of the situation. His quote was he was asked about the guys he's let go so far, and he's like, yeah, in dealing with guys like Presley and Mitch and Mason and Chooks, we found that it was better to like let them test free agency, knowing they're not going to be a part of the 2024 team. And I was like, did he say Mason? Was that a Freudian slip that he's just letting him go? And then like 10 minutes passed, and I was like, oh, he means Mason Cole. I blame Omar Khan. I did nothing wrong there. You got to be more aware, buddy. Like Mason Rudolph is a topic of conversation in this town. Mason Cole, it's like, say Mason Cole if that's who you mean.
Yeah. So, anyways, just to clarify too, just before I move on from all of this, if the 5th-year option is exercised, it becomes vested when exercised. So that's a $20 million hit coming to a salary near you. Now, they could rip it up, restructure, extend. Well, not restructure, but extend and redo the contract like they did with Trubisky, which I wish they would have never done. And I feel that's like one of the worst mistakes of this new regime, unfortunately, with Omar Khan. But he's pretty much learned from the master, Kevin Colbert, who I believe will be a future Hall of Famer as a general manager. That being said, all of a sudden we've jumped to, and we're talking about Mason Cole. We're talking about putting an offensive line against in front of this quarterback. One comment that came out of this was Broderick Jones was drafted to be a left tackle. They're going to get him as a left tackle. Great. That's what we want to hear. That gives you a little more wiggle room, because right tackles usually aren't taken as high. Or if the Steelers jump at one at 20, let's say they wait until free agency to address this, or they've done it in the second round, success and not success sometimes. Marcus Gilbert, one of the dudes that with a very long time probably should have been more decorated than he ever was, but was a second round pick. They can get a right tackle, okay? Because now they don't have to leap, trade up like they did for Broderick Jones, et cetera, et cetera. But everyone's looking in the middle of the line like, oh, they got to draft a center now. Well, there's still free agency before that. There's not a whole lot of dudes maybe hitting free agency, and I just kind of wanted to talk about how big of a priority that is. I think it will be. There's people that are already talking about, well, Spencer Anderson is going to play center. We don't know that. We don't know if Nate Herbig is going to play center. Well, they moved James Daniels over. No, well, James Daniels was listed. We were talking about this just yesterday off air. he listed as a center when drafted, but has he played center in the NFL? You know what I mean? He is like he's firmly the right guard on this team. I don't think he's going to end. I think if they were going to do that, they would have done it last year when Mason Cole, everyone's, the surprise, shock, and awe from the people where he got released. And it's like, did you see where he was snapping the ball? Like, it was at everybody's shoelaces. Like, come on, they got to fix that position. Does that mean they're going to go and grab somebody in the first round? Well, doing my little bat thinking and my quick bat analysis, the old Adam West Batman, they had the huge computers. I don't have any of that. I just have the Google machine. So usually, I did this a few years ago, anywhere from 3 to 5 centers. Usually it's 3, maybe 4 trickle out of the top 100, right? But you have about a quarter of the NFL that's playing guys that are drafted late rounds, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, or not drafted at all, playing center. That doesn't mean they're going to be doing good, but I have at least the confidence that maybe the next guy, even if it's Spencer Anderson, isn't going to snap the ball at, Kenny's knees or Mason Rudolph's shins, or even, God forbid, Mitch Trubisky. You put these guys behind an extra half second to a second and their whole and throw off their whole rhythm. It ain't a wonder it's crap. So it doesn't matter if you go out and Aaron Rodgers was going to play, behind this offensive line last year. It would have been tough. So
yeah,
I think center will be addressed. I think it's going to be, let's talk about how the Steelers usually do this, because Omar Khan followed the same pattern last year. He signed Patrick Peterson, and then he drafted Joey Porter Jr., which I think corner is still going to be there. I think we'll get to defense next, because quite honestly, do you see them really doing anything at running back? I don't. Do you see them doing anything at tight end? I don't.
Tight end, maybe as a later round pick, because you don't want to put too much stock into their interviews and who they're talking to, but I've noticed they're heavy on defensive interviews right now at the combine. And on the offensive side of the ball, it's like, tight ends and linemen. I haven't heard too much about receivers, nothing about running backs, nothing about quarterbacks, but tight ends are a sneaky spot that I could see them trying to replenish there, just because the Freiermuth extension is an unknown right now. Connor Hayward, to an extent, is an unknown right now because he could be gone at any second. Washington still has a lot left on his rookie deal, but I could see it being a sneaky spot. But as far, running back, no. Quarterback, no. Receiver, I'm interested to see the receiver interviews, because that's a spot where I like Calvin Austin, but the Steelers haven't really committed to him or figured out a way to use him properly. He's had his moments, and the big touchdown against the Raiders thrown by Kenny Pickett. The reverse where Jalen Warren pancaked the dude, I think it was versus the Bengals. He's had his moments, but you have to be aware that they have shown their hand a little bit in desiring somebody else to be wide receiver 3. I still think Calvin Austin can be good, and especially because Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, let's just be real for a second, dude. They could be gone tomorrow, any second, either of them. It doesn't make sense for the roster, but they're both such wild cards. They're both so outspoken, especially Pickens. And the shock jocks of Pittsburgh have recently turned on to this theory that Deontay Johnson might not even be here for the start of the season. So in the Steelers, it's kind of like defensive line. When the Steelers draft a receiver or a defensive lineman, regardless of round, you're like, okay, that guy's probably going to be good. Like they have really good scouting in the defensive line and receiver department, especially in the earlier rounds. They'll miss on later round guys, I'm sure. Like you can think of like DeMarcus Ayers, LT Walton.
Oh my goodness. They're like 7th round guys.
Yeah, there's guys who don't work, but if they pick a receiver or a D lineman within the first 4 rounds, chances are that guy's going to be somewhat good. They know what they're doing in those spots, and they're always looking to replenish, which I don't hate.
Yeah. Well, DeMarvin Leal we'll have to see. The reason
Leal is like the poster child for guy I always forget is on the team.
Yeah, you know what? It's the salary cap's historically risen like 30, 40 million, whatever it was, more than what they thought of. So now we're back. We kind of reset to what it might have been after COVID kind of destroyed some of the salary cap, some of the money that made it really tough to compete. Ben Roethlisberger's contract and having to have him take a pay cut, et cetera, and roster building. They just look at the numbers. They look at Deontay and they're like, wow, he's a cap hit of 15.8. They would save 10 million of that, but you're also, I think, handicapping the team, and it's the final year of his contract, and who knows what ends up happening there, right? Allen Robinson's the guy that's got to go. He's got that old contract that carried over from Los Angeles, and he's 31 or 32 years old as the season starts.
Oh yeah, he's gone. He's so gone.
He saves $10 million easily. And he has like a $12 million cap hit. So I think he's gone. Patrick Peterson, we've alluded to whether or not he can still play as a corner, but they don't. That's the reason why we're looking there. And we can look at offensive line. I'm not going to say that they're not going to take a center, but they don't have to jump at 20. Because I look over a corner the same way you were, and I'm saying, okay, if there's not somebody that's a right tackle that's a surefire, this is a guy that's going to be like long-term 10-year starter. I think you need to get somebody that's an anchor. You can't swing and miss. So if you go with the guy that has like 3 last names as the center from Oregon,
Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yes. We called him Jackson Powers Jackson the last time. Jackson.
Powers Johnson, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Or he's Johnson Powers Jackson. It could be either of the.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Oh, you just made me forget because now I jumped the Van Pran. Zach Frazier. The other one. And you get guys from like, big college programs, smart, intelligent players. But just like Creed Humphrey fell to like 58 or something to the Chiefs, one of these guys, I think one of them goes probably before the Steelers' second round pick, and the other one or two is going to be there maybe, or they get a little bit of an inkling. They got a feel on the pulse, and then they make a move and they do something like they did with Broderick Jones. So they don't necessarily have to jump right away, but you look at Old Mother Hubbard's cupboard is very bare in the secondary. We were discussing this on who stays, who goes, like whatever other players. Devontae Casey's 31 years old. Keanu Neal, he's still a little younger, but injury prone. They bring somebody that's 31 or so back, 30, 31 years old, like an Eric Rowe as a veteran player. Terrell Edmonds, still very young.
He'll be back.
He's going to be a free agent. I just wrote this on the website just the other day. I think I said it maybe here on one of the other shows too. Why not?
I'm almost positive, dude. Especially because the Titans, they got a new coaching staff. That's where Edmonds went to the Eagles and got traded to the Titans basically for pennies. He was part of a package deal. Titans got a new staff in there. Edmonds is a free agent. Steelers love reunions. Edmonds was good for them. I totally believe Edmonds is, if you're going to put money on a guy to sign with the Steelers this offseason, Edmonds might be your safest bet. And, dude, the way you talked about centers there for a second got me going, because I've been on this since the Jackson Powers Johnson talk began, and I think he'd be a home run of a draft selection for the Steelers. However, to be a first-round center, you have to be viewed as, and it isn't just my opinion, this is factual in the NFL, you have to be viewed as a future Hall of Famer. That's why Pouncey went in the first round. That's why the Cowboys guy who retired because of injuries,
Travis Frederick.
Yeah. Like, if you're a first round center, you're viewed as like, okay, this guy's going to be in Canton in like 15 years. And it isn't anything against centers. It's just that dating back or relating back to something I've talked about before on the show, the 4 most important positions in football are quarterback, left tackle, cornerback, and edge rusher. Those are the most 4 important positions in football. Those are the guys who are the most commonly taken in the first round. Those are the guys who are franchise pillars to a successful football team. Center, although very valuable, teams just don't take those guys in the first round. It's almost like a silent agreement amongst all 32 teams. Like, if you're going to take a guy in the first round who plays center, you're saying, okay, I think this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. And if Jackson Powers Johnson can be, that's great. But I don't think it's necessary to take him at 20. If they would take him at 20, I would assume, okay, they think he's going to be an all-pro, which is great. But they totally can sit back and take a guy like a cornerback in the first round, or a tackle in the first round, or, I mean, dare I say, a defensive lineman. I know, like, some people are like, oh, they don't need one. You can never have enough good defensive linemen. And I think this is also a very deep center class. Jackson Powers Johnson and Zach Frazier from West Virginia are largely viewed as the top center prospects. But there is a guy from Duke and a guy from Georgia that are flip-flopped as the 3-4 commonly. They're going to have their pick of the litter in the second round if that's what they want to do. They don't have to take the first-round guy. However, if they think Powers Johnson is the next Pouncey, go for it. But you're exactly right. Center isn't a spot that needs to be taken that early, especially with this roster right now where you can make an argument for tackle, corner, defensive lineman. Um, even I guess again, linebacker would be a stretch to an extent, but there is one guy who's viewed as by far and away the best linebacker prospect in this draft. And I heard a rumor that the Steelers like him more than any other team, just based off of what we've been able to see and hear, based off of interviews and meeting with these prospects. The Steelers love Texas A&M linebacker Edgerrin Cooper. He is linebacker one. He's the only linebacker of this class, middle linebacker, that is potentially viewed as a first-round pick. He's a do-it-all linebacker. He is the ceiling to be like one of these guys, like a Fred Warner or a Tremaine Edmonds or a Matt Milano, a guy who makes an impact, not just a steady starter we've grown accustomed to. So that's even a streak the Steelers can go down. They get Edgerrin Cooper and they get Zach Frazier in the second round. That's a good start to your draft. The main idea with the first two picks, especially in today's NFL, is you pick two guys who can start or heavily contribute as rookies. And with all of the spots that they need right now, tackle, defensive back, linebacker, defensive line, anybody they pick in those first two picks, they should at least be getting worked into the starting rotation within the first few games.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, you take a center, I still think it's going to be like the pattern is that they sign somebody in free agency and they pair them up with a rookie. And I've said this before. I don't know that I'm necessarily banging my fist for like a Brian Allen from the Rams. Got released a little early. He was hurt the year before that, lost his center job, was playing guard, had a huge contract that he had signed, unfortunately, and then got kind of hurt. And then it's more of a cap casualty, go explore options type thing. That's the kind of guy that they could sign that probably isn't going to break the bank, that's still under 30 years of age, that has experience as a veteran and can play more than one position on the offensive line. Then they go and hit their draft target. But if they miss their draft target, somebody leapfrogs them, goes to 18, and they really like the guy from Oregon, but let's say they don't like the guys from Georgia or whatever, you know what I mean? That's not where they want to go. Then this is somebody that can play, you know what I mean? Will you trust them more than Mason Cole? I sure hope so. And I think that's what they were looking for with somebody like Mason Cole, is that they knew that Kendrick Green didn't work out. And I can't fault them. Everybody's always going to look at, well, they took Pat Freiermuth over Creed Humphrey. They would have had this whole thing solved. Creed Humphrey was far from a surefire thing. You had him and Landon Dickerson both in that same draft coming in with some question marks. People will be like, what question marks? Well, some guys had injury history. Some guys had this. There's a reason why they were like second round picks, okay?
To those arguments, Freiermuth's ceiling is that of a top 5 tight end. He just
absolutely.
Injuries have kind of derailed him. He's not a good blocker by any means, but his receiving ability, he can hang with the best of them. And a tight end can be a game breaker. And
best friend of a quarterback, especially a young or an aging one on the way out, to help him maybe win a last Super Bowl. I don't fault it.
And Creed Humphrey, in a perfect world, you can do that every class and pick out guys who have been better. But all things considered, saying that he's the only one that would have been a better pick than Freiermuth, that's a good haul for them, that class, I feel like. And another name to watch out for, because I looked up free agent centers recently in the midst of all this talk, and a guy they liked who's going to be a free agent unless he's tagged or signed is Lloyd Cushenberry from the Broncos. He's up for a contract, and there was a lot of Lloyd Cushenberry talk in Pittsburgh when he was in his draft class. So that's another name that I feel like, just based off of how the Steelers operate, they probably still have tabs on him. They might look at him too. And one thing the Steelers are, whether it's been Colbert or Kahn, is consistent. They've evolved a little bit over the years, but they're still the same team. And I feel like that theory that they may sign a free agent center or a free agent corner and still draft high at that spot is likely. It's just covering your bases. There's nothing wrong against that, especially because with this new salary cap, the Steelers are actually last year they were able to sign guys like Cole Holcomb and Patrick Peterson and Isaac Sumalo, among others. They signed like 6 or 7 dudes, like 4 of which were impact guys or more. Omar Khan's going to have more money this offseason to work with. So whereas I thought at the beginning of this free agency period, tackle in particular might not be able to be addressed because it's so expensive. There's a chance the Steelers could sign their starting tackle or center or cornerback to this team this free agency period and knock a need off of the draft list. It's just right now, obviously, February 29th, we don't know what they're going to do right now, but they're going to have more money to work with than they did last year. And last year's free agent class, by all accounts, was a revelation in the Steelers franchise. They never signed that many players, let alone to start for that amount of money. And now he has more. So this is all going to change the closer we get to draft time. But they have a lot of options.
Yeah, I wonder the same about corner. We do talk about drafting, but I also wonder if there's any free agent targets. Seems like there's more than there is in the tackle market when it comes to free agents, but a lot of familiar names at cornerback that they've already run through, like a Steven Nelson, who I think is recovering from an injury now. Ahkello Witherspoon is another one. Artie Burns is probably floating around out there. These are guys that they've already put through the paces, didn't work out, and they're gone already. They're not; those are not the kind of returns you're looking to bring back to the Steelers. But some of these guys are like, pushing the same 29, 30 years old, and just how much of a, they've already been second contract guys.
Keep your eyes peeled for Kenny Moore. I like Kenny Moore. I was in on Kenny Moore being a trade target when the deadline approached because the Colts, I guess they were fighting for a playoff spot, but Kenny Moore was a name being brought up in trade circles when the deadline was approaching last year. I really like him because I don't think he'd be that expensive, and I think he's still good. L'Jarius Sneed, I feel like, is a pipe dream. I know I just went on a tangent about how we have more money, but he's he's the top cornerback free agent. And no matter how good you are, if you're the top guy on the corner market, he's going to get a crazy contract. So I don't foresee him as a potential Steeler.
Well, franchise tag, was he exclusive or was he?
No, they can explore trade off.
He got the other tag. Okay.
Yeah, non-exclusive. So teams are welcome to trade or make a counteroffer for Sneed. But Sneed's gonna be making close to $20 million a year. We don't have that kind of money for him. And whereas that'd be super exciting, I would be so shocked if they were to make a move like that. Kenny Moore, much more realistic. I feel like Kenny Moore can probably be had for a 2-3 year deal, averaging 10 to 15 per, maybe a little less, not everything guaranteed. So that's a name I really like as a possible Steeler. There are other names too. So it goes across the board. The Steelers are in a unique spot. I mentioned before, we're in a very quiet, subtle rebuild right now, but that means there's a lot of spots that they can look to upgrade and adjust. But you have to let free agency come before any of those decisions are final, because the free agent class isn't it's not out of this world, but there are multiple spots they can look to upgrade and add guys to. Another name that if he doesn't want to retire an Eagle, I know the Steelers for a fact tried to trade for Fletcher Cox 2 years ago. He's super old now, but he's a free agent and he may probably just want to retire an Eagle. But about 2 years ago, it was a confirmed story that the Eagles wanted a second-round pick for Cox, and the Steelers were offering a third and wouldn't come off of that third. So there's previous interest there.
Yeah.
Don't know if anything will come of that, but just something to chew on.
That's something. Two things I didn't explore here. Now, number one, why are we talking corner? It wasn't just because Pete, whether or not he may still be around, 33 years old, all this other stuff, cap hit. But there's no more Levi Wallace. There's no more Chandon Sullivan. There's no James Pierre. There's literal holes all across there. And then if they happen to feel DeMonte Casey's too old or Keanu Neal's injury prone and they move on from one of these guys.
Is Levi's up? That was
Levi's
last year?
up too. Yeah, Levi's going to be free agent too. So there literally is nobody else next to Porter Jr. unless you roll in. How old is Patrick Peterson? I feel like I'm always calling him such an old man, and he definitely lost a step. But depending on if they repurpose him and play him somewhere else, you just don't want to create more holes on this team. You know what I mean? That's part of the problem. And you're very right about defensive line as well. I know we keep jumping back and forth, but Andy Weidel is assistant GM, and that's what the Eagles did. They just had 8 guys that they rotate around. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but they had more than just your starters.
You're close.
And they were able to keep them fresh.
You're close.
So they definitely, the Eagles were all about corners and defensive line. And guess who you have here? A guy that comes from that school of thought that's in the front office.
Yeah, you can't get enough good defensive linemen or good defensive back play. I totally agree. That's a spot where I've matured over the years. I remember growing up and watching the draft as a kid. I always wanted us to pick like the Rashard Mendenhall Lima Swede draft was one of the happiest moments of my life. I was like, yes, we got a running back and a receiver. Let's go. And like, but the older I get, the more I realize loading up the trenches, if they pick any defensive lineman or offensive lineman, I'm like excited because I just know that those are the money spots. You have to be good at those spots. If you're good in the trenches, the rest will follow. And secondary is almost equally as important. You can never have enough good corners or defensive linemen. One thing the Steelers, I feel like, fell victim to during Cam Hayward's career was after the days of Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, and Javon Hargrave. Okay. After Stephon Tuitt hung it up and after Javon Hargrave left, the Steelers were like okay with just putting Joe Schmoes and nobodies and late round picks around Cam Hayward and saying, okay, go to work. And thankfully, they got Keanu Benton last year. I just hope they don't give Keanu Benton the same treatment as Cam Hayward, being like, you're good enough, you're a beast, so we're just going to draft like 5th and 6th round picks and sign journeyman. It doesn't hurt to reload the defensive line because those are big boys. They get tired, they need reps. And as you mentioned, the Eagles are a great example of if you have a rotation, like the Steelers start 3 defensive linemen. If you have 5, let alone 6, then you're sitting in a really good spot where you're always going to have a guy coming off the sideline who's fresh, whether that's Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, whoever is out of the starters, and then you bring in a guy like, Brandon Fisk, the guy from Clemson. The Steelers have met with a lot of the defensive lineman prospects and a lot of the cornerback prospects, showing me that even though free agency hasn't occurred yet, they're covering their bases ahead of time. If they're not able to get defensive lineman or a cornerback they feel like is worthy of starting multiple games or multiple snaps in free agency, they are doing all of the homework on these guys, which is what you want to see because, as previously mentioned, defensive line and cornerback, like defensive line edge rusher, they are important spots, and that's how you build a championship team. You have to cover. You can't if you're gonna cut corners at any spots, the trenches in the secondary and quarterback are the spots that you can't cut corners at. So they can't do enough research with defensive line and cornerbacks, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned any edge rushers because we feel they're pretty flush. There could even be Marcus Golden, if he comes back, would be like the 4th guy behind Nick Herbig. You got Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, obviously. Or maybe Bud Dupree is another guy to sniff around.
I would love Bud Dupree back, but I almost look at the edge rushers the same as I look at linebacker, where but less of a need. Edge rusher is a spot where they're set with their 2 starters. You got TJ Watt, obviously, and Highsmith, MVP and an all-pro caliber player. Then you got Herbig, who flashed as a rookie, and Golden if he's back. However, in Steelers fashion, if they were to get a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round who just fell because the best player available and he's a great edge rusher, I'm not going to scoff at that. They could use the relief, especially because these past 2 years in particular, we've seen, unfortunately, TJ Watt get hurt for a lot of games. And I don't want to acknowledge that reality that he might be getting older, but to have a backup who is a step above a guy like Herbig, who's still he flashed, but there's no guarantee about Herbig, and Golden could be gone at any second. So edge rusher is a spot that I haven't noticed them go out of their way to like interview guys or anything, but it's still early in the process. And that is a spot that, like linebacker and defensive line, the Steelers are still the Steelers at heart. And if they were to draft a linebacker or an edge rusher early, some fans may not like it, but you can almost guarantee that guy's going to play significant snaps sometime soon. The Steelers have an idea of what they're going to do with that guy. So edge rusher is a really sneaky, not a need, but it's a spot that I could accept as an early draft pick just because of that. Like it's just as simple as that. I love Highsmith and I love TJ, obviously, but they're not the deepest at that spot.
No, that makes a ton of sense. But I think we've rounded the bases. Forgot to mention this as well. Senior Bowl, Isaac Williams, who's an assistant offensive line coach with the Steelers, was down there as one of the coaches down in Mobile, Alabama, and got a very close look. He was on one of the squads along with another offensive line coach from the Colts that was operating those units. So they got to look at all these guys like front and center too and run through the paces. You're right about the corners. There was a few of them. I think Nate Wiggins, Quinyon Mitchell were at least two of the names, because Mitchell was the one who said who's the greatest player in like MAC history, or somebody asked him something like that, and he said he was, which is
Yeah.
kind of funny over
They
Big
didn't meet
Ben.
with Mitchell yet. They didn't meet with
Oh, they
Mitchell yet.
didn't. Somebody else asked. They were going to meet with him.
Yeah.
Was what it was.
Wexel asked about him. I like Mitchell, and he fits the bill. I mean, he's a MAC player, and he's really, really good. So I like Mitchell. But they did meet with Wiggins, the Clemson cornerback, and they met with who's a white dude from Iowa, Cooper DeJean. They met with Cooper DeJean, and
that's so funny. It's like, yeah, we know who he is.
He's
the first white corner in like 30 years or something.
They're gonna get Jackie Robinson, baby. The reverse.
It was like, so I forget who the last was, but Jason Sehorn's the only other guy that ever comes to mind.
Yeah, so. And exactly, yeah, Sehorn, the GOAT. They're people love to make fun of people like myself, and they're like, oh, they're meeting with everybody. Yeah, they're meeting with a lot of people, but you still can look at what they're doing and get an idea of what they're thinking. Like, they're not meeting with every single prospect, but they've made it a point of emphasis to meet with the top corners, the top defensive line, and the top linebackers over the past few days. And say what you want about, oh, they're going to meet with everybody. They're not meeting with everybody. I think they are purposefully looking at those spots because they can add a starting cornerback or linebacker or defensive lineman in free agency. But if they swing and miss, they have to know this class because they aren't deep at any of those spots.
Yeah. Hey, put punter on the list too.
I would do the guy from Iowa. Get Cooper DeJean in the Iowa punter. Make it an Iowa affair here.
Tina would love that. So that'd be right in her wheelhouse. We have one more thing we got to cover that we didn't talk about, because we've talked about everything. We talked about the trenches. We talked about the skill positions. Definitely hammered quarterback forever. Bill Hillgrove, happy trails in retirement. 30 years, the Steelers play-by-play announcer. So it's gonna things. Myron Cope retired. I remember how different it was going to Tunch with his battles and passing away, moving over to Craig Wolfley. Now you're going to have a whole new, and Max Stark sometimes is in there too, but as part of the radio broadcast, it's going to be interesting. It really is. So, different times are changing, man, constantly. So
I always like Bill. Bill's one of the few, the media members that never I felt like he never talked down to fans or people like myself who had ideas or theories. He was always he didn't die. He's very inviting and very he's open to talk to fans, where that's kind of been lost in the media circuit, especially in Pittsburgh, with people that have this kind of entitleism and don't want to entertain conversation with fans. But Hargrove is always a great dude. From what I could tell, straight shooter, great announcer. I didn't listen to much of the Pittsburgh broadcast. I'm never really bothered by the CBS or NBC broadcast, but I know a lot of Pittsburgh fans would turn off the TV sound and turn on Hargrove.
It's out of sync.
Yeah.
But what I like to do is actually at the games, I have a little pocket radio. I don't always bring it in, but sometimes I have somebody annoying that's sitting next to me, and I'll plug in at least one earpiece, and then you hear if somebody's down on the field, because then the cameras pan away. You don't always see it if it's depending on your vantage point and where you're at on the field. And there's a bunch of bodies usually around that player, and also then you get to also hear too, almost like you're in the stadium. And then you hear almost an instant replay, and you're like, oh man, how much was that? Oh, that was a 32-yard reception by George Pickens or something.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So I enjoy doing that. So a happy retirement. Congratulations. Bill Hillgrove, those type of jobs to hold those down. There's only 32 of them around the league. So kudos for him. And I can't even think of a time where he hasn't announced it, like if he was sick, a day off, anything like that. And these guys have to travel and everything else too. I mean, a lot of times they're sitting in the press box with the windows open, it's cold weather and everything. So, there's a grind to that. The other one was going to be real quick, because I don't know how much we want to get into this, but there's a lot of, your clickbait and everything is just going around. And take a look at this if you see it straight up. The Steelers report card from the NFLPA, the Players Association, treatment of families, an F-, which I didn't even know was a grade. And they're not the worst, but I heard this has to deal with daycare or having to pay for daycare. And there's a lot of people ripping the players in the comments, and they're like, wow, millionaires have to pay for this just like everybody else. And a lot of it is just like some amenities or additional benefits aside from salary. Food in the cafeteria was pretty decent, but man, they ripped nutritionist, dietitian gets a D, locker room gets an F. I always thought their locker room was actually pretty decent, to be honest. I have been in a few of them. Even the Cowboys, Dallas Cowgirls cheerleaders, or the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, whatever you call them, cowgirls. They have an awesome locker room too. If you ever tour that stadium, they have like the giant makeup mirrors and everything in front of all of them. So maybe the guys here in Pittsburgh are a little jelly about that. Training room D+, training staff C, weight room C. So guess what? They got all new weight staff and training staff that's coming in. Some guys have been retired. Maybe that has to do with some of the injuries and stuff that the team has seen. Maybe we're seeing something fly under the radar. And I know like Garrett Piedmont, some of those guys have been around for a long time, but maybe they were shown the door. Maybe they were quietly asked to walk away. Maybe some other things. But I also think some of this, you see team travel, strength coaches was a B+, which is weird. So the actual coaches, including ownership, got an F, head coach got an A, team travel was a D. So does ownership get an F for maybe they don't have they want better facilities? They didn't rank dead last in any of these, but they were pretty close. Team travel, I think, they had plane issues this year. The Buffalo situation with the games getting moved and how they shuffle these guys around and move them. Maybe that was a sore spot. How much do you weigh into some of this as being, on a happiness scale? Head coach was 5th, and a lot of people laugh and they poke fun, but Tomlin is who he is. People come here to play for him, but other teams see this, and now you got to attract free agents and bring them in. Just hopefully some of this is getting communicated, and maybe if it already was, or they were promised something by ownership, that's the reason why Art Rooney gets an F and is 31st out of 32 teams on this report card.
Yeah, I hate to say that I think it matters, but I do think it matters. If you want to look at it as a compliment to Tomlin, that's a positive spin on it, that Tomlin is viewed as the 5th best coach in the NFL to his players, and he's the only thing of the report card that got an A. It's a testament to him. And I feel like we kind of all knew this was the case without seeing the proof behind it of the report card for a while here. The Steeler way, the Steelers being old-fashioned, the Steelers not wanting to change things, it's coming to a front. And I think Rooney would benefit from being open to advancing and evolving and adjusting a little bit. You have to listen to these grades were given by the Steelers. So it isn't just like fans or media members saying, this is what I saw, this is what I think. This is coming from your employees. It's like a culture survey. So I would like to think that it can be a sort of a wake-up call, because unfortunately, I feel like it correlates with the Steelers being left behind as of late with this offensive movement in the NFL lately. Like, it seems like the Steelers are hanging on by a thread, and they're good enough to be competitive, but they're just not with the Kansas City, the Buffalo, the Bengals, like the Ravens, even though ironically Kansas City's stuff was ranked bad as well, but they have Patrick Mahomes. So that kind of is irrelevant. But I feel like there is a little bit of credibility behind this, because they could afford to adjust and make some. Dude, I mean, you're talking about a freaking weight room. Like put the money in and upgrade it. If that's what it's going to take to get the morale going and help your players. The locker room is dated too, dude. There's a screenshot of the Pitt locker room and the Steelers locker room. The Pitt locker room is way more up to date and way more modern, and they share the same practice facilities. So when you have a college team, not even a good one, outside of Kenny Pickett's years and Larry Fitzgerald years and Dan Marino years, when their locker room is better than the professional team in the same city, that's a bad sign. And it's like any other work environment in America, any other corporation. Everything's got to be clicking. Everything's got to be on the same page. So I was happy to see that Tomlin was regarded as highly as he is. Yeah, look at that. It's a Pitt locker room. But the Steelers, yeah, I feel like they could afford to open up their ears and change some things. I mean, AR2, Rooney Jr., he's not doing himself any favors, because there's already this idea out there that he's not his dad and will never be his dad. And I feel like ironically he's almost trying to be too much like his dad with these old-fashioned views. It's like, dude, the NFL changes, times change. They've got to make some adjustments because I can't sit here and pretend like being the second or third worst ranked team in all these categories is just nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the common thread with the Kansas City Chiefs and getting blasted there, guess what? Both teams, the Steelers and Chiefs, go to a college campus for training camp, and it's a D3 campus in the middle of freaking nowhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's part of it, even though I know that some of the amenities there at St. Vincent College in Latrobe were actually upgraded over the last several years. But these guys at least have air conditioning, where the other guys, you know, the old timers have that badge of honor, like they were just sweating it out in basically freshman dorms or whatever.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of the younger players being drafted to the Steelers don't really see the allure of being at St. Vincent College.
If you think about it, during the COVID years, I was thinking about this too. And it was like they actually practiced in the stadium. And then if you weren't happy that any of that's changed, you haven't experienced anything else. Most of the guys on the Steelers are young. Yeah. Your older players are like Cam Hayward and stuff like that. So a lot of these guys are coming from the areas such as, Kenny Pickett, he votes for this. That's his locker room. You know what I mean? He was just in that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that was recently. I mean, it looks more comfortable to me. The padded chairs, looks like there's more than 18 inches of ass space to sit in a little cubicle or whatever. There's a spot. It's well lit.
You can double up with your boy.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. I'd like pull up a chair. That's all you're getting is the chair. You don't even get a stall. You might have to share like a locker with somebody else. But anyways, dude, I mean, it's disappointing to some degree, but
it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. I just want to give credit to the fact that it does matter, but it isn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
As just mentioned, the Chiefs were ranked really shitty in all those categories too, but they have Patrick Mahomes. So you can get around this, but
yeah, and
adjustments should be made.
Some of these teams, they have, come on now. Now I was going to say they have brand new stadiums, like the two LA teams probably have state-of-the-art accommodations, the Raiders being in Vegas and moving. Anybody that has a brand new stadium, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing in, what is it now? It was TIAA, Bank, Everbank, whatever it is. And the Cons, not Omar,
Tony.
but there's Tony, that's the AEW guy, and then his dad, Shad Khan.
Shad Khan.
Yeah. Look at that, man. Same thing. You got all these beautiful, like, they got like swivel chairs, like you'd have like these $300, $500 conference room or office chairs and stuff like that. So, and that's in like very old facilities. Now, I'm going to also assume they have different practice facilities from game facilities and stuff like that. Some teams actually do practice at or near like the Bengals, for example, their practice fields are right outside Paycor. So every situation isn't the same. It's hard to just lump it in, but good Lord. Yeah. I was like, the Steelers locker room still impressive for me to look at as an outsider. But when you put it up against one of these other guys and they come over, like you got an Allen Robinson that just came over and has been in these different areas where they've refurbished stadiums or stuff like that. Or you got a guy that's come from a top flight college program. It's chopped liver. Like, you need to do something different here. So that's all I'm gonna say about it. Put a bow on this show. Went a little longer than what we wanted to, but we needed a good one here, and I think it was a good one. Thanks for joining us once again, my friend. Any other closing remarks?
Don't thank me, brother. I'm happy to be here, and it was overdue because I haven't been on for a while, and we had those issues yesterday with my phone. So happy to be back, happy to provide answers to the people, whether it makes them happy or pisses them off. I'm always transparent. I'm giving you the fullest flash at all times.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. We tried to go on Tuesday, too. It just, nothing was working for us, dude. Like, we couldn't get the schedule lined up then. But now we're back on the horn. Hopefully do it again sometime soon. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. Till next time, my name's Joe. His name's Flash. We encourage everyone out there, as we always do, to close out the show, to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.